All right, let's get going. So thanks everybody for attending the subtle art of selling business continuity. This is Greg Rowe talking. I'm the Chief Channel Officer of Globalgig. And today's webinar, the handout is accessible in the webinar. I'll certainly follow up with a handout to everybody, and then this will be recorded as well. Already have one question relative to what kind of trout was in that picture. So that was a rainbow trout, actually, caught while fly fishing up in Grand County near Winter Park. So today's webinar, Subtle Art of Selling Business Continuity. So I'm going to start out with a little bit about Globalgig so you can understand why we're talking about this. But the next roughly 30 minutes will be all about everything we've learned about selling business continuity at the edge. And we know a lot about this particular subject because we are a global wireless service provider. And business continuity at the edge is one of the primary use cases we sell and we provide solutions to, along with Wireline solutions and SD-WAN solutions. We've been at it since 2007, have a little over 300,000 SIMs deployed globally. And we have offices, a couple of offices in the United States, offices in London, Paris, Morocco, as well as Sydney. And kind of wireless is what we are all about. It's at our core, if you will. So what is business continuity at the edge? It's really about making sure your customers have connectivity to their edge locations, be it a restaurant, a retail store, a manufacturing facility, or just an office. With the explosion of cloud and cloud-based applications, customers can't live without that connectivity. Loss of connectivity to those applications results in chaos, as Dilbert would portray, but directly it results in the loss of cash, either lost revenue in the case of point of sale transactions, customers walking out the door, lost productivity in the case of manufacturers who can't connect to applications such as SAP HANA. So today's discussion around business continuity is going to be all about the edge. And if you've heard the term, the edge is the new core. A lot of you I know are highly proficient with SD-WAN and delivering and selling SD-WAN solutions. That is really about the edge and making that as robust and having the business continuity that the core actually has. And so when you're talking about business continuity at the edge, it really is all about the applications. A couple of examples of applications that we commonly encounter and use cases that we solve for. Certainly point of sale, that is probably the largest single vertical application given its prevalence in the retail environment. But certainly also voice with hosted voice, the Office 365 and Google Suite for customers' offices, and ERP systems such as SAP HANA. SAP HANA and a number of others, in some cases Salesforce, in terms of how customers have integrated those applications into their core business operations and deemed them critical. It's also important to understand what's not critical. And this becomes very important when we talk about the type of solution you put together for the edge in terms of what's critical and what is not critical. Gaining an understanding of that and the intricacies around those applications is really where the subtle art is based in, because from that'll lead you to putting together the right type of solution for the customer. And so it really starts with picking the right paths. Certainly fiber and broadband is going to be the most prevalent path. It's going to be the primary path. Fixed wireless and satellite are certainly good options for primary connectivity as well as business continuity type of connectivity. But today's webinar is going to be very focused with 4G LTE. And the reason that is because it fits so incredibly well as a business continuity solution. So when you're picking those paths, a couple of the things you want to absolutely look for when you started with the applications. You need to pick a business continuity connection that's highly available, that hits the right cost basis for the customer, the right cost model. To a great extent, using 4G is like putting in a business continuity insurance policy. We'll talk a little bit about rates and rate plans and pricing here in a bit. Simplicity is also critical, right? With many edge locations, be they in small networks, just a couple, 3 sites, on up to multi-thousand site networks, deployment needs to be simplified. 4G fits this extremely well from that standpoint. And we'll talk a bit about what is entailed with putting that solution together and installing that type of solution. Making sure the performance is there, right? Again, starting with the applications, what type of upload, download, latency requirements do the applications have? And making sure that you size that appropriately. And finally, resiliency. When you're putting together kind of a business continuity WAN portfolio for each edge location for a customer, the resiliency of those connection types is critical. Again, 4G is beautiful from this standpoint in that if you've elected a broadband or a DSL or a fiber or all the above type of connectivity for primary connectivity, 4G is intrinsically resilient and redundant and diverse from those types of connectivity. So it's a great choice from that standpoint. Going to the applications and understanding what they are will drive you to what type of failover is needed. And there are different types of classifications. Probably the most prevalent in terms of need is what I call instantaneous failover. So essentially, the business continuity connection is operating just like another connection. There's session persistence, which means that something like a hosted voice or a VoIP call does not drop as you would use your business continuity connection. Point of sale doesn't quite need session persistence. It can live without that. Immediate failover works real well for point of sale type of applications, as well as oftentimes Office 365 and ERP type of applications that are driving the need. And then there's a category that I just classify as, yes, I need failover. And that type of failover is also prevalent in the marketplace, although far less desirable when you look at the type of solutions you can put together today, in that it can take seconds to even minutes to fail over. There are definitely some use cases where applications operate such that that's perfectly acceptable to a customer. But in kind of today's market and with technology that's available today, that is far less prevalent to see. We've already talked, when we talked about picking the paths, about throughput and latency, and making sure that the connections that are selected deliver on the throughput and latency of the critical applications, certainly. And then data consumption comes into play. When you're choosing 4G LTE, the pricing models are all based on data consumption. And so getting an understanding of what that consumption characteristic is for the applications will lead you to sizing the failover plan appropriately. So when is it a good time to talk to your customer about business continuity at the edge? You know, there are a couple of trigger points that I've seen that are definitely most common. In today's market, with the kind of explosion of SD-WAN and what I would say is a generational transition from MPLS to SD-WAN or virtualized WAN, that is a perfect time to talk about business continuity. In many aspects, SD-WAN solves for that, and coupling that with 4G is a perfect lead-in to that discussion and incorporating that into the solution. To an extent, it's like adding fries with the burger. Whenever you're quoting an internet circuit, I think is a great time. Oftentimes for edge locations and quoting an internet circuit, it's a great practice to be proactive and incorporate a wireless backup solution. That's something you can do without checking any systems. Easy, straightforward pricing, pervasive coverage allow you to incorporate that into kind of a best practice. Always after an outage. That's always a perfect time to bring up this type of discussion. We recently had a Fortune 100 manufacturer, global manufacturer. They had a little over 500 locations, and they had a Mac Daddy network, dual fiber at every location, just a absolute tier one enterprise class global network, but they still had outages. And some of those outages turned out to be incredibly painful, causing the CEO to issue an edict to their IT organization to fix it or else. So any type of outage is a great time to bring that into play. Certainly at time of renewal is a very natural time to bring up the discussion, and kind of what I alluded to with quoting any internet circuit. A best practice is always, it's never a bad time to bring up the discussion. It's a consultative type of discussion focused on the customer's applications, so it's one many of your customers will value. In the scheme of 4G LTE, one of the reasons it's a beautiful solution for this type of use case for business continuity at the edge is that it's now mature and it's pervasive, right? Speeds are out there and have been out there from 15 to 150 megabit per second download speeds with LTE and LTE Advanced. And with LTE Pro coming online, which will bring speeds all the way up to a gigabit per second, we saw a great partner of ours, Cradlepoint, come in with announce their gigabit per second 4G LTE router here recently, and in conjunction with AT&T, who identified a number of markets that they're launching that technology into. And that is really a precursor or even part of the 5G rollout that is taking place. We had a webinar last week on the pathway to 5G. I'll be sure to make sure you all get a update on or link to that recording. A lot of great information from our partner Cradlepoint in that. But 5G is definitely coming. It's really to become mature and pervasive, probably a couple of years away. And the best way to prepare your customer for 5G is really twofold. Virtualizing the WAN, so SD-WAN, and incorporating LTE as a backup now. When we talk about the 4G LTE business continuity stack, there are a couple of common elements to any WAN network, right? You have a firewall, you have a primary router or SD-WAN box, and then you have the 4G LTE components, the failover component, the actual modem itself, and then the antenna. And all of these components can be put into one, so they're all in one box. In a moment, I'm going to go over a configuration that looks exactly like that. Very simple, small footprint, great for many edge locations. A lot of great choices from equipment vendors and technology out there, such as Cradlepoint, Peplink, and Meraki. A slight variation of this model is to keep the firewall external, but have a box that integrates the router or SD-WAN, the failover functionality, the modem, and the antenna. Again, Cradlepoint, Peplink, Meraki are all great choices in this space. It gives the customer all of the failover options. One that is not quite as prevalent is where you have the firewall and router external. They could be one in the same device or two different devices. But you put the failover capability and the 4G LTE modem and antenna all into one. This means you're running your broadband circuit or fiber circuit into something like a cradle point or a PEP-Link device, along with the 4G LTE, and handing off one LAN connection to the primary router or SD-WAN device. Not nearly as common, but we definitely do see some configurations in the retail space where this is a good fit based on some of the equipment they already have deployed. And kind of a final configuration or stack variation is where the failover function sits with the router or SD-WAN and firewall. This is probably the most prevalent with SD-WAN, in that you just have a plethora of choices out there of providers to choose from. You have all of the failover types that can be delivered, and the 4G backup can be added at any time in the life cycle of the network. So it's really about adding a very cost-effective 4G access modem and antenna. Adding in the IP to the discussion, really, as with any internet connection, is critical. In the wireless world, what you want to understand is their IP need public dynamic or static? Depending on the type of router or SD-WAN and their network topology, both of those come into play and are quite prevalent in the market. And in some cases, you're going to do completely privatized connection for the 4G LTE to keep that as a completely private network, never touching the internet. And a final note on the antenna, and we'll talk a little bit very briefly about antennas here in a minute. The antenna can be kind of integrated with the 4G LTE modem, or it can be a separate device altogether that can be placed somewhere else in the office or store, either internal or external. Now, if we look at a mock-up of a kind of all-in-one solution, here I have pictured this is a cradle point 2200 device, kind of their top-of-the-line branch router. So it has integrated into it a 4G LTE modem. This particular device carries all of their modem lines. So it carries now up to their gigabit per second modem, down to just their 4G LTE modem. It can take in multiple WAN connections from fiber providers or broadband providers, or a mix of both. And of course, the SIM, right, goes directly into the device. So kind of an all-in-one device. A slight tweak to this is for customers who still want a separate firewall. Maybe they love their Fortinets or their Palo Altos, but they keep the router, SD-WAN, 4G modem all integrated into one device. And a couple of examples of use cases that we've done with this type of configuration. So we did a pizza chain, a little over 80 locations. In that case, we actually used a PEP-Link device. Great solution because they had a small footprint need. They also needed to be highly economical, so kind of having everything in one was important for them. I think we put in broadband connections. They had hosted voice, and then, of course, the integrated 4G LTE modem. Another example is actually an automotive shop, a little over 1,000 locations. In their case, they already had Cisco Meraki deployed. They loved the device, they loved the platform, the cloud-based Meraki platform, the SD-WAN capabilities of that platform. And the cool thing is that Meraki now has a model that has an integrated 4G LTE modem, the MX67C, and they have great plans for this this device going into 2019. But great solution. Customer already had that deployed, so it was a straightforward kind of SIM and service only. So we provided the SIMs and the connectivity that went into those Meraki devices. Another probably common, probably the first most common or the most common configuration are where customers already have a primary router or SD-WAN device. And the choices here are many, right? You can have, of course, your SD-WAN providers such as CloudGenix or BigLeaf or Ariaka. The Meraki we already talked about. Meraki has a lot of models that most of their models do not have an integrated 4G LTE modem. So in that case, you would bring it in via a wireless 4G modem. What I have pictured here is actually the Cradlepoint 850. We oftentimes use a PepLink device, BR1 Mini, in these cases. That device, the primary function is really a radio signal, right? It takes the radio signal, makes that connection, and delivers a WAN connection, an internet connection into the primary router or SD-WAN device. Again, you can have one or two modems for something such as this. And a bonus that you get out of this type of configuration is out-of-band management, which can be really high value. So with out-of-band management, you can create a remote console type of access to the primary router or SD-WAN. So not only are you providing a resilient 4G LTE connection, but you're also providing them remote console access into their primary router or SD-WAN device. So in many cases, you can eliminate truck rolls because you can do things like rebooting the device without rolling a truck. And that is a high value added feature with that type of solution. And it's high value because it's very, very minimal cost to incorporate into adding that failover connection as well. A couple of use cases where we've done this type of configuration. So we had a 180 site global manufacturer that had implemented a Ariaka SD-WAN solution, and we provided them, in that case, Cradlepoint 850s in the US, Europe, several countries in Asia, as well as Canada, all pooled under one global plan. Another example is probably one that's a little more common in terms of just the fat small business section is a 5-location grocery store. So again, they already had their WAN in place. They had their primary router in place. In this case, they had an outage, and it was a pretty painful event. Shut down, in their case, all of their point of sale transactions. And so they went about seeking a solution. In that case, we utilized a PepLink BR1 Mini and gave them a backup connection that they layered into that network that was already in place. Now, one of the things that we all know from being addicted to our devices is that no network is great everywhere. So no mobile network is the best everywhere. And solving that is something we call wireless WAN optimization. And what that is about is giving a customer, right, a multi-site customer, it can be one site to thousands of sites, the best mobile network at each location. So they may have locations that work best with AT&T, others that work best with Verizon, all delivered to them as one service, one pool from one provider. So to speak, one bill, one throat to choke. This is a critical kind of value add capability and very powerful when selling against the mobile network operators. We've had success with some of the largest failover business continuity networks out there, multi-thousand site networks, where the mobile network operators were simply eliminated because they couldn't deliver for the customer kind of this capability. Now, I'd promised to talk about wireless terminology and antennas, and I will be brief here. But what's shown is the most prevalent or common, where you really screw in an antenna fin or a couple of antenna fins directly into the 4G device. In this case, this is a Cradlepoint 1600, and it has two fins screwed into it. This is the most common kind of configuration out there. It's very cost effective. You can oftentimes put these type of devices out into the office or retail store. You can mount them on a wall so you can locate them where there's a good signal. They work from power over Ethernet, and so they're highly flexible from that standpoint. And those antenna fins can be incredibly effective. But you do encounter situations where an external antenna is needed, something that brings more power to the mix. In that case, a wall mount is a great choice. And there are just so many flavors and versions of this. MIMO, multi-input, multi-output, is a term you'll see frequently when talking wireless. And many of the antennas have that kind of integrated in. They provide two leads. So essentially you would unscrew the fins and screw the coax leads into the modem. These can be placed inside or outside, and they just come in all different types of form factors, from desk mounts to wall mounts to external antennas, pole mounts, you name it. There is a wide variety of external antennas out there, and they're all there to solve for signal, right? To do something to get a better signal. When it boils down to it, providing a wireless connection is a radio connection, right? So signal strength, signal to noise ratio, those are key parameters and something that is critical to address relative to the install, to ensure that you're doing everything to maximize kind of the range that you're falling into, because getting good SINAR, if you will, is the best path to getting good upload, download, and latency. So pre-site qualification or site pre-qualification, how to go about this. So one of the most common questions we encounter is, what will my performance be? And that is a great question. And it is one that is not easily answered. There's a couple of tools I'm going to talk to you about here, but certainly one of the choices is to hire us, hire Globalgig, hire a professional. We'll dispatch a tech with test sets. They'll take multiple measurements, testing all of the signal parameters that we just talked about, testing upload and download speeds on multiple networks, so that everybody's going to know ahead of time just exactly which mobile network is the best and what type of performance you should expect. Doing that obviously comes with a cost, and it's a cost many customers don't want to bear. So there are some great kind of do-it-yourself options. There are a couple of free apps, one by OpenSignal, one by Sensorly. If you have an Android device or an Apple device, you can go out and download these. They're really crowdsourcing apps, and they do a couple of cool things. So one, they give you really good coverage maps. And they're not the marketing type of coverage maps you see from the mobile network operators, but rather crowdsourced coverage maps. So their technology is based on people using this app and reading in that information and building a map of coverage based off of that. The data is directional at best, right? So it's the value of that data is really for directional purposes. It's not something you can rely on, but what you can rely on incorporated in the app are actual speed tests. Both apps provide the ability to do a speed test, and they are going to test the wireless provider that your phone is using, but they're going to give you a detailed feedback, right? Your latency, your upload, and your download speed. The pictures you see here are pictures I downloaded from my house the other day, and you can see what the speeds are there. But the cool thing about this is a customer can download these apps if they have a employee with a AT&T device or an employee with a Verizon device or a T-Mobile device or a Sprint device. They can directly test. They can take as many tests as they want at any time of the day, and also at any location within the office, which is always a key characteristic to solve for. Where you put the radio, if you will, matters. If it's encased in rebar and concrete, the signal can really suffer. But if it's out closer to a window, you can get a great signal. So the do-it-yourself option is a great option, as well as hiring somebody like Globalgig to dispatch a tech and do those site pre-quals ahead of time. Installation, again, kind of like site pre-qual, dispatch a tech. And there are basic installs, which essentially entails taking that kind of 4G access modem, which has the antenna fins on it, unboxing that, connecting it, powering it up, locating it where there is the best signal, and helping the customer get it wired, and then working with them on test and turn up. Also very common in this space is what I would put into the do-it-yourself bucket. So it's a matter of drop shipping the 4G device with the SIMs already installed in the device, and having the customer put the device together, plug it in, power it up, and work with the provider on test and turn up. Very common in the marketplace. The devices are pretty straightforward. If you're getting into external antennas, this is definitely not the way to go, but it is a choice that a lot of customers make, and with a lot of the devices, a great choice. So the wireless portal is also very critical for customers. Globalgig's is called Orchestra, and it provides a single pane of glass. The customer can see all of their deployed SIMs, the associated devices. They can see all of the usage across those devices as well as the pool. And they can set up the notifications relative to usage parameters so that they stay informed relative to their data usage and can be proactive relative to managing that. When we talk about pricing, there are a number of different models. So kind of the first model is where the customer owns the modem already. I talked earlier about the automotive parts customer who already had the Meraki's. All they need is a SIM and service, right? So this type of model is very straightforward. Certainly we can roll a truck to install the SIM, but oftentimes customers in these scenarios, we can ship the SIMs and the customer can install the SIMs. We activate them and they're off and running. These type of plans for a 1 gigabyte per month pooled plan, and I'm going to talk about how that kind of thing works here in a minute, starts around $23.75 a month for a very common type of business continuity plan. Now, a plan where you have a 4G LTE modem and, of course, a SIM. So this is a case where the customer has their own primary SD-WAN device or router. This type of plan, really the variation from the plan above is that we're adding in equipment. Similar plan, 1 gigabyte a month of data that a customer pools across, or they allocate into a pool for all of their sites, starts at about $50 a month. And finally, an all-in-one solution. So I have pictured here a Cisco Meraki. This could be a Cradle Point. This could be a PepLink as well, where you have the modem, the device, all-in-one solution. It's doing far more than just the 4G LTE connection. And those can start around $80 a month and go up from there based on the type of device that the customer's looking to incorporate into the network. When we talk about plans, so there are pooled plans and there are shared plans. So a pooled plan, as is illustrated here, is basically based on each SIM having a data allocation. So in this case, each SIM allocates a gigabyte of data into a pool. There are 10 SIMs, and so there's a 10 gigabyte pool. Now, in terms of usage, the actual usage could vary from 0 to 3 gigabytes, right? It could be any variation of usage across the sites, but all of those sites are sharing that data pool. If they add 3 more devices, they add 3 more gigabytes into their pool. Now they have a 13 gigabyte pool. This is in contrast to separating the SIM from the data pool. So a shared plan. So in a shared plan, a customer, kind of the SKU, if you will, a customer buys is the actual data plan itself. So typically there's a charge per SIM per month, and then they buy a shared data pool, and they can make that data pool any size they want. The key difference with a pooled plan is that that shared data pool or shared data plan is static. So in this case, it shows, say, the same 10 SIMs. They have a 10 gigabyte shared data plan. And let's say the next month they add 3 more SIMs, but their shared data plan stays the same, right? So it goes into a scenario in which they still have the same 10 gigabytes, but now they have 13 SIMs or 13 locations that are sharing that plan. And the key thing to understand with this is that there are all different types of plans in terms of sizes. Globalgig can build completely customized plans so that a customer might have a profile in which they have 100 sites and 90 of the sites have great terrestrial internet connectivity, but 10 of the sites have either no terrestrial connectivity or really, really poor connectivity. So they have much higher data consumption. So that's where we can use a shared type of model and build a completely customized plan. Certainly in this market, unlimited is a big talking point. One of the things I will throw in about unlimited is it's always critical to dig into the fine print and to pay attention to, are there things like throttling, because there almost always is, or are there restrictions on the type of data? For example, many of those types of plans restrict any type of streaming. So say you're planning to use it for video and you'll be doing streaming. When you're doing that, a lot of those types of plans restrict that type of use case. So definitely an option, and it can be a great option. It's all about making sure it fits the customer's use case. And then, of course, domestic and global. So Globalgig is global, right? We provide these types of services across a little over 200 countries and build all kinds of different plans for customers from that standpoint, in terms of giving them a single global shared data pool to giving them regionalized or continental type of shared data pools, to giving them country-specific shared data pools. We have built all of the above. One of our kind of differentiators is that we are nimble and flexible in that light. But in today's market, it is very common for customers to have global locations, global needs, and being able to have that all come from one provider is a big value prop. Now, the subtle art, to kind of summarize the subtle art aspect of this. So always start with the applications. What are the customer's business critical applications? That's the right place to start that discussion, and to have that discussion build around that. You know, what happens at the edge when they lose that connectivity? What is the cost of that to their business? And also a great talking point is, what are their 5G plans? I mentioned earlier that 5G is on its way. It isn't here now, but it has so much buzz that many of your customers are thinking about it. They're wanting it. It's just not here yet. So asking about that is actually a great way to go back to incorporating 4G, which is the best way your customer and you can prepare for that. But to sum it all up, put the focus on the application and work backwards, because business continuity isn't a product, it's a necessity. And if you work from the applications backwards, you're going to end up with the right solution. You're going to end up with the best cost point, and you're going to end up with a customer that is has a great experience. And as far as this webinar and content, that summarizes the content for the day. So I will open it up here to anybody that might have any questions. And I think I've unmuted folks, so you're free to ask, or you can certainly ask via the online GoToWebinar app. Well, I'll tell you what, really appreciate everybody's time. Hope you found the webinar valuable. Again, this is all recorded, so we'll make sure you get a link to the recording, and hope to work with you all soon. Have a great day.